what non-coding skill made the biggest difference in your career? This is a question from our subscribers. And we came up with 7 skills, the top 7 most important. Let's start with number 1. And we said office politics. And within that bag of office politics goes things like stakeholder management and influence, but also things like conflict resolution, which you need to work well in a developer team. Bogdan, what would a developer need to know about office politics?
Well, number 1, office politics are everywhere. It does not matter that we are engineers. We are not shielded from it. They happen all the time in any interaction. There is some sort of status negotiation based on your title and your experience, but also how people perceive you. And I think it's very important to make sure that you know the people you are working with, to be the kind of person that if you wouldn't work together, people will still want to have a beer with, not be this colleague that's always trying to look smart, and he does look smart, but nobody wants to hang out with them because layoffs happen. And if you're likable, if you're a cool person to work with, if people had great interactions with you and they had fun working with you, they will call you back. Like if I look back at the list of people that I worked with, the top 5 people that I would always recommend for a job, they weren't necessarily like the most technically savvy ones, but they were cool people. They were people that were predictable. They were people that would not generate conflict. They would just want to get the work done. They didn't have so much ego, and they were just chill to hang out with.
And we also mentioned conflict resolution, right? When talking about pull request and technical discussions. I know poor conflict resolution skills can be one of the main reasons why there is like troubles in development teams.
So people will get all bugged up of tile goal, like, hey, you should use a arrow function here, but no, it's a function. And then nobody would give in. And what would happen is that would become like a big issue. And you want to be the kind of person that is not afraid of conflict, but also doesn't generate unnecessary conflict, because conflict is the price we pay, right? It's like debt. So you don't want to have too much. So ideally, you always look for consensus. You always put the best company decision forward and you try to reach consensus, but also don't pull back. It doesn't mean you're not going to push back on certain things. You got to, bring the problem to the people. If someone comments on your pull request and you cannot merge that, make the person have a call with you. Because they don't care, they don't have skin in the game. Don't just be silent there and wait for it and go the next day in the stand-up and you look like you're the slow person. So you got to be aware of all those dynamics and make sure that you don't avoid conflict, but also that you don't create unnecessary conflict.
Yeah, I see a lot of developers fall into the fight or flight, either avoid all conflict altogether, especially in corporate, right? In corporate environments, or be super, be the asshole in the team, let's say, that they're always, creating conflict. And I feel like the skill there is to channel that conflict into a creative problem solving, right? And that's one skill that you want to practice and get good at. Before we move on to being a good team player, which it's kind of self-explanatory, but it's not, especially if you're a dev and you've never done like team sports. One thing I would say is you have to kind of think about your political capital sometime that you have in the company, right? And it's very good for you to establish relationships with people outside of your team. Don't, if the only person in the management, it's your boss or your engineering manager or your VP, then you might have an issue. And you have to be proactive for this. Now, the CTO won't call you and tell you, let's hang out for coffee. You have to. So if you see someone, it doesn't have to be, someone that's at the C level, right? But I remember one thing I did very well in my last developer job was to, whenever I needed some information, of course, there was the Jira, there was the documentation, but I would actually write that person and hang out for coffee and ask them, hey, I remember there was a developer managing our VMs. And I was like, why are we even doing this stuff? And then I went and I had a coffee and he explained me actually a lot of stuff that I didn't know about, like operating systems and all that. Definitely useful. So think about relationships outside of your team and think about how you can establish those by being proactive. On to point number 2, which is being a good team player.
I think a lot of the conflict of everyday work, it's typical if you ever play like a team sport, like if you play soccer or anything that happens in a bigger team, you got all these people, everybody's got their own insecurities, everybody's got their own personalities, everybody wants to be the star. Sometimes you lose, so it gets frustrating, people start blaming each other, and that's when you train your muscle, like outside work, and you get better at learning when you need to kind of suck it up and learning when you need to kind of escalate and really redefine how other people treat you and how you treat them. So I think a lot of people will benefit from that, and you're going to make a lot of friends and you're going to feel better too.
Also, skill number 3, which we said it's agency, right? And what do we mean by agency? We mean taking initiative, right, in the company, right? And second, planning your career. Let's talk about the first one, which is having agency inside your team, inside your company.
Yeah, so a good example of this would be I talk to a lot of people every day, and they're like, "Well, in my company we don't do testing, so I haven't wrote a lot of tests." And the reality is, you can always take up 3 hours from your week and write a bunch of tests. And if you take 3 hours every week to write tests, I promise you're going to cover the whole code base in test in 6 months. So there's so much you can actually do. Like there's literally, unless you're in a place where there's a lot of red tape, but sometimes you cannot touch the infrastructure. Everything else you can at least take a look at and have an opinion on. And most of the times you can even change and fix things. So there's no reason for you to just coast and spend 6 months just doing what we call ticket farming. You need to have your own projects inside the companies and outside the company. Your bigger project should be your career, but even inside the company, you can always go in and be like, okay, let me fix the pipeline we're running. Let me fix the code quality. Let me fix the accessibility, or at least see what's the problem there. Let me look into web performance.
And I believe it's very important to show that you're not expecting a pay raise and you're not expecting a promotion, but you simply do these things because you want to, because you have initiative. And by the way, there's this eternal debate of AI will replace developers. I mean, AI doesn't have initiative. So people are asking, how can I stand out? What skills should I learn? I mean, the first thing is just don't take things for granted and go out there and think by yourself and show that you can go and find problems by yourself, and you don't need your manager or your boss to constantly tell you, hey, go do that. And this is probably, I think this is the easiest way to stand out in your company, because so few people, they just come and just get done what they're being told, and then they do a little bit on top of that, and then they just bounce, right? The second, it's planning your career, right? And I remember back then, you and I, we had a stage in our careers where we weren't so proactive, right? And then I remember a moment where, I had a journal and I was writing, hey, by this time I want to be senior dev. And by this time I want to, I said like 6 months from now, I want to be here. And then 1 year after I found that diary and nothing changed in my life. And I was pretty depressed. But that was a breaking point where I realized I cannot externalize, right, my career growth to the company, the boss in the market, right? What do we mean by agency in your career?
So again, you don't control the market and you don't control the agenda of your company. So sometimes those promotions that you're hoping for, well, they'll tell you, what, we're going to do it next year. Sure, you can wait and you can delegate that to them and ask them, what do I need to do to get a promotion? But the reality is that you don't work for your company, you work for the market. The only thing the market actually cares about is value creation. As a developer, that's usually end-to-end delivery. So you got to look at that set of skills that you have in the set of skills that you need to deliver end-to-end, which are usually a bit of back-end databases. There's cloud in there. It's not only the front end, right? We need to be really good and realize, okay, have an honest kind of assessment with yourself. We have a technical assessment if you want to take, realize where you are, and then focus at least on the value creation, because opportunities will arrive. But if you're not constantly planning and preparing for that, when the opportunity comes, and you never know when it comes, you won't raise up to the challenge.
And I remember back in when you made the jump from senior to principal, it was kind of unexpected. Like you were planning to stay in that company where you were a senior dev. It was a great company. And then the opportunity came and you were prepared, right? And you made the jump very fast from senior to principal just by being ready when the opportunity presented to you. As Bogdan mentioned, by the way, the best way for you to plan your career is to know, first of all, what you're lacking. And there is a free technical assessment in the comments and the description of this video. It will take you about 10 minutes and it will tell you exactly what you're lacking for you to be able to build a roadmap for you to level up. Moving on to point number 4, which has a lot to do with planning your career, which is interviewing and job finding, which is something, Bogdan, that developers only try to get good at interviewing when they're out of a job, which is usually when it's too late and they have bills and there is no time, right? So being more proactive here as well, right?
Yeah, so interviewing is probably the best paid skill that you can have. And without you being able to sell and charge for your skills, you don't really have a skill. So a skill that only counts if somebody is willing to pay you for it. That's a very important mindset, because people get lost in the online courses and they go into functional programming and all these purist approaches. Like, cool, but is anybody going to pay you for that? And I'm like, no, but this is my passion. I'm like, okay, then it's a hobby. Are you willing to have that as a hobby and be a low-paid hobbyist? And most of the times the answer is no, especially if you have a mortgage and if you want to build a life on your career. So interviewing, what we tell people at the senior dev is that the second most important document in your life after your passport is your resume. And that every hour you spend interviewing, you can imagine that you get $1,000 like paid to you, because you will at some point. Because interviewing, it's one of the things that pretty much everybody hates. And job finding is the most frustrating and emotionally daunting process you'll ever go to. If you get good at hard things, your list can last longer than your competition, you'll get better results.
And just to comment on that, I believe a lot of developers get emotionally even destroyed, honestly. Whenever they get a rejection, they go to a 6-step interview process, then they get rejected, and that throws them into a loop of doubting their skills, doubting their career, a loop of self-pity. And that's actually a sign that they haven't yet mastered the market at an emotional level, right? Because they are getting emotionally involved with a company who did not extend an offer. And you have to be a master of managing your time and your commitment, meaning you only commit to companies who commit to you. Now, if you want us to make a more in-depth video about this, about how to manage the job search, how to manage your resume, your job applying, just let us know in the comments, because it's not the point of this video. Number 5 is consistency in learning and growing.
So life goes in seasons, but one of my biggest regrets looking back to my years is that I would grow a lot in 1 year, 2 years, and then I would drop my career and go, like sometimes I would even go just video gaming for 6 months, played a lot of Counter-Strike, which I'm not proud of, and then switched to Call of Duty Mobile, which is I'm even least proud of. And I got incredibly good, and like all that energy would go nowhere. And if you look at my career, it could have been a lot less painful, and I probably could have grew, maybe not faster, but in a more consistent way if I just had a bit more discipline.
This is something I believe a lot of juniors have to learn. You don't build a career in 3 months. You don't build it in 3 years. Doing a bit every day has this power of compound interest, where you can't even imagine how far you can get just by being consistent, because most people are not. Most people, they say, I'm going to do this thing this weekend, and they don't even finish, whether it's a side project. Most people are consistent maybe for a few days max. And that's why just simply by being consistent, you will get much farther. And that's something that I wish I told myself as a junior there as well. Just stick to things a bit longer, Now, number 6, complementary skills to coding, Bogdan. And you were very specific on this one. You said, for example, as a front-end dev, you need to get into composition and typography, photography, like you're mentioning. And as a backend, they have things like networking, hardware, CPU architecture, basically things that are around coding, right?
Exactly. You need to expand your interest. Ideally, it's something that makes your coding skills even better, right? If you're a front-end dev and you have an aesthetic taste, you'll produce better stuff. And in the end, you get paid. The people that will look at your interface or the UI you produced together with the designer that you had to negotiate with and agree with, they don't really know about what's under the hood. They just see the results. So if you know a bit about colors and a couple of tricks, you're already better off. You can get into photography, you can get into painting, anything that has to do with making things look better. And if you're a backend, it kind of goes into that logical layer where, as a backend, it's more about the low-level stuff, the networking, load balancing, hardware, memory, CPU architecture, but build that into a hobby. And the cool thing about these hobbies is you get to meet other people, and you get to meet people that are doing product management at another company. So it pays into your network. And it's a bit of office politics, as you say, but applied to the outside world, where you're networking while you're doing something fun and you're learning something that will complement your coding skills.
Yeah, something that we didn't mention in point 1, but office politics has a negative connotation, which shouldn't have, because humans are political animals. So there's politics everywhere. There's politics at the dinner table. There's politics in the government and election and all that. So wherever there is humans, there is politics. And it's not negative, it's not positive. It really depends on what you use politics for, right? But going back to what you said, Bogdan, I think this also plays into this burnout crisis that we have in software engineering now, and also the mental health crisis, where a lot of developers, their only identity is their job. A lot of people after 10 years doing the same thing, they're like, hey, I'm burnout. And they believe the problem is with software engineering itself. That this career is boring and it's not giving me anything new. But having all these hobbies will bring a lot of joy into your life, and you will not depend on your job to bring all that happiness. And that will pay off into you being able to stick at it a bit longer and actually being successful, right? So besides having complementary skills, I would say have a fun life, have some hobbies, leave your house after you finish your job. We work remotely now. We are all the time tied to our computers. When you feel a bit down, just go outside, take some sun, go do something with friends that don't work in tech at all, right? And finally, building into that, Bogdan, passion and curiosity, which we didn't want it to add because it sounds like a platitude, right? But what do we exactly mean by passion being a non-coding skill that makes a difference?
Yeah, I mean, in general, you want to be passionate about engineering and science as a whole. And things get bad at your company, or you're stuck with a manager you hate, or maybe you're building a tool that you don't really care about. You can translate that into your private life and be like, okay, let me automate everything in my house. Let me install some IoT devices. Let me code some Alexa skills. You can always bring that back, that thing that got you building things. And I do that all the time. And it helps you going because you realize, hey, I'm doing this. There's a bit more than money that I get from my job. That's why I'm a developer. And if you don't get anything else but the money from being a developer, you're going to have a really short career because I promise you, you will get laid off. The big payoff will disappear. And the only people that will stay in the game long enough so they get good are the ones that they find some inner joy to what they do.
And that's a huge misconception right now that developers have. It's discipline that's going to keep you going, when actually it's kind of love of the game. It's kind of having that passion that, as you say, when you're laid off or the money isn't there, you just keep building stuff because that's who you are, kind of. You like to build stuff and you're curious. And the other misconception, and I remember when I was a junior dev and I met some senior devs that were more passionate than me and they did this, they were talking about stuff that I was like, honestly, like, why do you care about this? I just do my job and I just write my React components and I'm done. And I always thought it's something that you're born with, that passion for software engineering. And that would reinforce my own imposter syndrome because I'll be like, oh, they're passionate, I'm not, I should not be a developer. And I feel like a lot of developers suffer that because they don't understand passion and curiosity. It's a skill, it's an attitude, it's something you learn. And the way you learn that, it's basically by putting things out there in the world. Because when you spend a weekend working on something, you kind of get emotionally attached. And that emotional attachment to that little project, to understanding of things a bit deeper, that's what passion is, right? In the end, and curiosity.
Yes, you got to learn how to cultivate your love for the craft. It's not something you just wake up and you're like, oh, I love what I'm doing. You got to make an active effort to be present and to really give your best, whatever you're doing at that present moment. And you can do this by teaching, pick up your nephew or whoever has computer classes. They usually need help with some programming because it's taught really poorly in schools. You can help them, or you can build, some DEI electronics at your place or domotize everything in your house. But bring that skill into the real world and it will come back to you.
Awesome, yeah. And also don't expect, even if you do that, you will have days where, it's just a job and you don't 100%, you're not crazy about everything you're doing. It's like any relationship in life, it's got its ups and downs. With that being said, folks, check out the free technical assessment. In the comments, you'll also see a get to senior training about what the senior dev can help you if you're looking for mentorship, direct mentorship from Bogdan and I. Thank you, Bogdan, and we will see you folks in the next one.